Welcome to the WIHS Journal. I'm Jack Pike, your host, and today we are continuing with part 2 of my discussion with Peter Wolfgang, Executive Director of the Family Institute of Connecticut. In our last program, Peter was talking about the many issues facing Connecticut families and FIC's role in advocating for Christian biblical family values and opposing legislation and regulation that would undermine those values and the rights of parents. When we ended last time, Peter was just finishing talking about the let kids be kids issue.
And what we want is some sort of comprehensive solution. We're not trying to be against the schools or against the child. This is not about targeting the child. We actually want the targeting of the child to stop. We want parental rights to be respected, and we want the schools to work with the parents because no one is going to know what that child needs more than his or her own parents.
Right.
The schools should not be complicit in this sort of gender confusion. So that's what Let Kids Be Kids is. And that, it's the first year of a multi-year project. We held a press conference last year. We did a lot of work on it. We stirred up a lot of interest. And this year we're going to try to push that again.
That's great. That's really good. And kind of one of the things that segues into that also, there was, of course, attempts to put in amendments to the state constitution to allow, basically enshrine abortion.
That's right.
And other things. And, of course, there was one in the state that was to the state constitution, but there were some other things attached to it, which you guys worked on.
That's right, Jack. And just by way of clarification, at the beginning of our interview, you said the legislative session here in Connecticut begins in February. This year, it actually begins in January. It begins next week because this is what's called the long session. Every other year is the long session.
Okay.
Goes from January to June. So we need to suit up for battle right away because this stuff's going to start. But, you talked about making the medical community more aware of the sort of things that you and I are fighting on at the state capitol. And they do touch upon the medical profession repeatedly over and over again. And we begin with the thing you just mentioned. SJ4 was a proposal to put an amendment. It was a resolution to begin the process. Fortunately for us in Connecticut, amending the state constitution is a very Byzantine process. You have to go through a lot of steps. It doesn't happen overnight. And we were able to stop this at the earliest stage, or one of the earliest stages. But SJ4, Senate Joint Resolution 4, was a proposal to put an amendment into our state constitution, making abortion and gender transition even sort of super rights that supersede other rights, like religious liberty, parental rights, and so forth. And we were able to stop that. That got brought up in committee, but it died in the legislature. It would have to be approved by the legislature before it could go to the voters to go into the state constitution. But Jack, that's not the first time that we've had to beat that thing down. So we can expect that the amendment for gender transition and abortions, to put that right into the state constitution. Why they would need to do that, I don't know. Abortion's already legal in Connecticut. As a matter of political reality, our ability to overturn the statute keeping abortion legal in Connecticut is practically nil. So why they felt they have to put it in the state constitution, I don't know. But that's the sort of extremism that we have to deal with.
Would it be because if you enshrined it in the Constitution, there's less chance of any legislature passing a law that would limit the abortion?
I think so.
Yeah.
And even there, so abortion has been on the statutes in Connecticut since 1990. That's the only thing keeping abortion legal since Roe versus Wade was overturned, here in Connecticut at least. And our chances, we've not even been able to touch that statute in over 30 years. Parental notification, 24-hour waiting period, the most basic parental notification, for goodness sakes, which even Massachusetts and Rhode Island have. We can't even get a public hearing on it in Connecticut. So I do think it's really about the extremism. Another thing people need to know about that we know for sure will come up again, because Planned Parenthood has already said so in the media, was a bill last year that would have forced Catholic hospitals in Connecticut to allow referrals by their employees for abortion and gender transitions. Now, this is a violation of Christian medical principles, and we were able to stop the bill this year. But I think everyone of whatever communion or denomination you are, I mean, if they can do that to the Catholic Church, they can do anything to anybody. This was a huge attack on religious liberty. The Family Institute and the Connecticut Catholic Conference and a few other groups like yourselves, Jack, were able to stop it. I would have liked to have seen more involvement from the Catholic hospitals themselves on this, but Planned Parenthood has already said they intend to bring this back. And you know, the funny thing is the Association of Connecticut Hospitals actually lobbied this bill a little. They wanted some little tweak, but they didn't oppose the bill outright. This bill is going to come back, and it's something we need to fight. They're going after the conscience rights of medical providers, not just through the democratic process, Jack. There's stuff going on in the regulatory process, which we caught very late in the year in Connecticut. So we stopped the abortion amendment. We stopped the attack trying to force Catholic hospitals to allow referrals for abortion. Then we discovered very late in the process, very quietly, that Planned Parenthood and the people that do its bidding were trying to overturn conscience protections that have been in regulatory laws in Connecticut going back to the 1970s that protect doctors from being complicit in abortions. They're trying to do that, and they were trying to repeal a regulation in Connecticut that forces a doctor to protect the life of a newborn that accidentally survives a botched abortion. It doesn't get any more radical than this. Well, they're trying to make it happen in Connecticut. So we're going to need the medical community to rise up, because I think they have a lot of sway with the public and with the legislators, and the legislators will listen to them.
And I think this, as I remember, this was trying to be done through a regulatory process instead of any kind of law, although that certainly is going to come about. But it seemed like from a regulatory process, they were just trying to skirt around the legislature to just put that in there. We
found this at the last minute, and we applied as much pressure as we could. So did some great legislators like Senator Heather Summers. And the Department of Public Health decided to hold another public hearing. I guess there had been one that no one even knew about. And they decided to hold a second public hearing, and literally hundreds of pro-lifers made their voices heard. There were many of us who were there physically, and then many more who wrote in, and we overwhelmed the pro-abortion side. And that fight's actually still going on. That has not been resolved. But you're right. They tried to do it under the cover of darkness. That's how the people who claim to care about democracy, that's how they do a lot of things now. And I think that there's been the weak response. You've mentioned there's a weak response from the Catholic hospitals about this. And I think it has to do with the fact that you have less Catholic figures that are now in charge at the head of the hospitals, and you have now big conglomerates that own these hospitals that don't necessarily reflect those values. Yeah, and so, I think they're becoming weaker in their opposition. I think you may be right. The hospitals in Connecticut used to be under the direct control of the Catholic bishops, the Catholic hospitals in Connecticut. And some of those hospitals were given over to an entity called Trinity Health, who on paper is committed to Catholic values, right? The bishops, it's not like they were trying to give away the store. They were trying to protect Catholic values. But I don't know that Trinity is doing that as strongly as we like. I think their attitude was, we'll let them pass the law and we'll just file a lawsuit. But, you know, you want to keep the enemy as far away from the castle gates as possible. You don't want to fight him once he's already inside. And I'd really like to see Trinity Health this year coming up there with us testifying against this bill. You have been listening to part 2 of 3 journal segments from my discussion with Peter Wolfgang, Executive Director of the Family Institute of Connecticut, as we are talking about the many ethical and moral challenges facing Christian families and the public at large in the state of Connecticut. We will conclude with this discussion next time. If you need further help with this information, you may call WIHS during our business hours 9 to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday at 860-346-1049. The opinions expressed are of the participant and not necessarily the staff or management of WIHS. I'm Jack Pike for WIHS News.